The genie is out of the bottle, as they say. Mike Mangini is out, and Mike Portnoy, a very familiar face, is back in. Now, I've been getting a lot of comments, actually, about people asking what my thoughts are about this, and it just happened. Alright, so originally I wasn't even going to say anything about the topic because, it happened so suddenly and so soon that I didn't really even know what to say or what to think about the whole thing. Now, I've always had my own opinions on the Mike Portnoy versus Mike Mangini thing, which I will more concisely put together in this video, so stick around if you want to see that. But some of my initial thoughts about this whole situation is, thank you. Yes. Thank you to Mike Portnoy for coming back into the fold and rejoining his old stomping grounds here. And thank you to the other members of Dream Theater for accepting an old friend back into the fold. Because we all know Mike Portnoy was there since the beginning, all the way back when Dream and Day Unite, the Majesty days. He started the whole thing, and I think it's fitting. Hopefully he continues on and he can finish the whole thing as well. Now, as far as what to expect from this whole thing, I'm not entirely sure. The reality of the situation is we're dealing with sort of aging rock stars, alright? So you can't expect the magic to be there just as it was back in the 1990s or even with the 2000s, okay? So I'm a little bit apprehensive in that respect. Not saying that age, has a terrible amount to do with this, but just looking at James LaBrie and his vocals, and there are obvious limitations to what you can do when you get older, right? Especially at a physical capacity. Now, from a creative standpoint, maybe from a creative standpoint, they could make something brilliant happen in their older age that they wouldn't have been able to do in their youth. But really, it's just a caveat to say that I'm not expecting the youthful exuberance that we've come to know from their older albums. Alright, so my expectations are not incredibly high, but I am very excited to see what comes of this. And the fact that this happened so suddenly kind of blindsided me. I think it blindsided everybody. I got a number of text messages from all sorts of people saying, did you hear Mike Portnoy's back in Dream Theater? I'm like, I thought they were bullshitting me, in all honesty. I thought they were just telling me lies. Even when I looked up on the, the Google homepage or whatever, and I saw Mike Portnoy reunites with Dream Theater, I thought that was a lie too. I was like, is everyone just messing with me right now? Is this April Fool's? Is this actually happening? But no, the genie, in fact, is out of the bottle. The genie. I love that. I can't take credit for that joke, by the way, but I am going to convey it to you through this camera lens. You better believe it. Now, I've compiled a whole list of other thoughts that I have on this situation as well. And this pertains to Mike Portnoy as a drummer and Mike Mangini as a drummer. And I've actually put together this little Venn diagram here. It's not really a little Venn diagram. There's quite a bit going on right there. And I'm actually going to put that up on the screen. There's going to be an empty Venn diagram up there first. I'll fill it in as we're going. What I'd like to start out with is what both of these drummers share with each other. Okay, so what they both bring to the table in a common way. So what Mike Portnoy does and what Mike Mangini does that are the same, that meet in the middle. The first point, I think, goes without saying. They are both incredibly technically skilled drummers. They play at the highest level that anybody can pretty much play at, okay? And they have excelled at their instrument more than 99.9% of other people have. And that is definitely worth noting, okay? So the technique, their ability to play fancy fills, and essentially play anything that they want at an incredibly high level. Which brings me to the next point. They are both indeed drummers. Drummers. Now, what does that mean? What is a drummer's drummer? Well, in short, it's a drummer that has a lot in common with other drummers. Okay, so the average person on the street that doesn't play the drums might not get the same amount of ecstasy or kick out of what these guys are doing, right? So let's just be blunt about that. The average person will probably not take a look at Mike Mangini's playing and his, limbs going in all different directions. And look, he's playing a 4 over here, and he's playing a 3 over here, and with his foot, he's playing a 2. Oh my God, 4, 3, 2. That's incredible. That's like the Pythagorean theorem on a triangle. You better believe it. And I believe he can play the triangle as well. He is a percussionist, after all. And the same goes for Mike Portnoy. Dazzling technical skills, and things that drummers have a lot in common with, okay? I know you've met plenty of drummers in your life. Maybe you haven't, but if you have, you know that the drummer's temperament is a very specific one. And they go for the drummers, okay? Like, wholesale. Another thing these two have in common, they are incredibly busy players, okay? And that's just something that's 100% true. Let's face it, going all the way back to the beginning, just think of all the drums throughout Dream Theater's entire discography and tell me that they're not busy. Now, I do believe that Mike Portnoy does like to reel it in a little bit more than, say, Mangini, but it's easy to see that both of these guys like to switch it up every few measures. They don't like playing the same thing for too long and then even coming back to it for too long. They basically they like to do things that aren't repeated very often, okay? And really demand a high amount of patience and intense listening from the listener, all right? So they're expecting a lot out of whoever's listening to the music, and I think that's part of the allure of both of these guys, and that definitely speaks to their technical skill and being a drummer's drummer, right? Now, let's get into the divergence, okay? Now, I'm going to start with Mike Mangini's side. It's going to be a little bit shorter than the Portnoy side, I got to say, all right? But we're going to start off with Mike Mangini's side. And the technically skilled aspect is a little more heavily tilted in Mangini's sphere. I'm not saying that he's more technically skilled or less technically skilled than Portnoy, or really I'm not saying he's more technically skilled, but he definitely rests on technical skill more so than Mike Portnoy would, okay? And I know that sounds crazy, but it is true, and it will come full circle, literally as a Venn diagram here, as this video goes along. Now, it's not going to be an extremely long video. I'll try to keep it, as short as I possibly can, but I have to get all these thoughts out to you. Mike Mangini, he's a Berkeley guy. Let's just face the facts, all right? And I'm not necessarily saying that as a pejorative or as an insult, but it can be seen as a pejorative or even insulting to a degree. Not saying that being a Berkeley faculty member is low on the totem pole, absolutely not. It's an incredibly respectable thing that Mike Mangini has done, teaching the youth, bringing music to the masses in that elite atmosphere, I think is wonderful, A lot of people who watch this channel understand that I'm all about the academia and the continuation of this great music and wondering why all of these intricacies exist, how to perform these technically astounding bits and all that. That's part and parcel to this channel. So the Berkeley thing can be seen as a double-edged sword, right? When you're playing in a band like Dream Theater, people are expecting a certain degree of energy to the performance, and sometimes it falls a little bit flat when it comes to Mangini. I'm not going to lie. Which brings me to my next point, which this is less of a negative, but I will go a little bit more in depth in a little bit. His polyrhythms. I have been personally astounded by some of the things that Mike Mangini is able to do with his limb separation. And I have to admit, some of the stuff I've watched from YouTube videos that he's put out, just him playing in a room solo, it shocked the hell out of me. And I've never really seen anybody play drums like that before. And it goes back to before. He is at an incredibly high level when it comes to his playing, and might have the edge on Mike Portnoy when it comes to that degree, right? you know, being able to do all those different things and adding those ghost notes and little fills in between crevices that they should not exist in, okay? But with that said, okay, within the context of Dream Theater, I do think that a lot of that polyrhythmic stuff was a lot of wasted potential, okay? And I know that sounds sacrilegious to a lot of the Dream Theater, you know, hardline fanboys out there that are just blinded by their love for the band. Listen, I love Dream Theater as much as the next guy, and there's the reason why I'm making this video. But I have to recognize the negatives when I see them, okay? And this is more of a negative type of thing. I don't think Dream Theater ever really took advantage of that polyrhythmic crazy stuff in any artistic way that really grabbed me. All right, so that's sort of what I'm thinking here. And I'm not saying that I'm like the top, or you have to please me, you know, but I am one of millions of fans of the band that I'm sure feel the same way. I just never saw Mike Mangini being used in a context that really made him stick out as a member of Dream Theater, which is more to Mike Portnoy's credit. You know, I think that you see where this video is going as we're moving along, correct? So, yeah, to that point, I haven't seen Mike Mangini really shine as an artist within the band. And I haven't really seen the band use and utilize his polyrhythmic sort of thing in a from a production standpoint. I feel like a lot of the albums that Mangini is on didn't exactly utilize the production in the proper way. He might have been overly processed, overly compressed, where you can't really hear a lot of those subtleties on the studio recording. So that's a little bit upsetting when it comes to this. Which brings me to the next point. Mike Mangini was on 4 decent/okay albums. Now I know you're saying, well Mike, they released 5 albums. I think you can fill in the gaps there. 4 decent/okay albums, and I will leave it at that. He had some very, very good moments, okay? Good moments. And I highlight the word good because, let's face it, there are other descriptive terms that go higher than good, okay? So, just in short, he's a Berkeley guy, all right? So he's a musician's man, which there's nothing wrong with that. We need more musicians. Honestly, I wish a lot more Berkeley heads would join the pop world, because that would be awesome to have more highly skilled musicians in that world to elevate it, all right? Because I think the divergence also occurred between the pop world and the musicians world, right? The technically skilled musicians became jaded, didn't want to be a part of the pop atmosphere, and that separation occurred. Pop became less intricate, it became less interesting, and became a lot less skillful, all right? So we have to admit that at the end of the day, all right? So he's got the polyrhythms, he's got his 4 decent/okay albums. You guys can fill in the blanks there. And he had many good moments. Now, we must move to Mike Portnoy's circle. So moving right along with this whole synopsis of Portnoy versus Mangini, which is totally impromptu, by the way. I was not expecting to do this, but, you know, I made this Venn diagram maybe like 15, 20 minutes or so. So, you know, totally off the cuff, and a lot of this is, you know, all of this is unscripted, basically. I have like a rough guide of what I'm going to say, but hey, you know, it makes it, I think, a little more interesting here. But let's get back into this side. So, to Portnoy's credit, all right, these are all the things that I believe really give Portnoy the edge, and there's pretty much all positives here, okay? Let's start with the most important ones. He is a songwriter. As we know, Mike Portnoy has written a plethora of Dream Theater's material over the course of the years, okay? And when it comes to the 12-step AA suite, all the brilliant, brilliant lyrics involved with that, and the writing associated, I mean, it's no doubt that Mike Portnoy has chops as a lyricist, a background vocalist. You know, I kind of miss that. I miss him getting the, you know, having his friend in the back of the drum set have the thing, and the microphone come up and he goes, blah blah, shine like a fire. You know, that part is cool. I like him when they do that. And then he, you know, shoves the microphone away. He did that a lot in Budokan too, man. Great live show. But anyway, all right, so his chops as a songwriter cannot be overlooked or understated. And I'm going to be using that word a lot, okay? Understated is going to be the word of the video. Next, a composer. Mike Portnoy composes his drum parts. And conversely to Mike Mangini not being totally utilized as a creative force, which I think could have been done a little bit better, or a lot better, I should say. Mike Portnoy really made it known that he was a compositional force within the band. His drum parts are dialed in, all right, and they're deliberate. They have meaning. Everything he plays has meaning. Even when it goes a little bit off the rails and is a little goofy, it still has a purpose within the context of the song. And I think that's where Mike Portnoy really, really, really shines. His drum parts are not just there, okay? They have impact on the actual song itself, which really ties in his songwriting abilities as well. Remember, songwriting and composition are not these one-dimensional terms. Songwriting and composition can include drums, vocals, lyrics, guitar riffs. Hell, you know, a lot of guitar riffs I'm sure came out of Mike Portnoy's brain, just kind of listening to what's going on and maybe altering what Petrucci is doing. I know Lars Ulrich did that in Metallica. He would take James's riffs and say, hey, why don't you play that, you know, half as long this time, and why don't you tag those two chords at the end, or why don't you maybe move it up a step or something like that. You know, things that James Hetfield in that context, or the rhythm guitarist in Metallica, I really hope you guys know who that is, he would have his mind changed. He would have his mind warped by Lars with that little back and forth, that exchange. And the songs came out different, and I would say a lot better because of that. And that's the interplay between Mike Portnoy, the crucial interplay between him and the other band members, all right? As a songwriter, as a composer, and the third point, as an architect, all right? So Roger Waters had a very famous interview, or maybe it's not that famous, but I remember it, so that counts for something, I guess. Roger Waters has said, a band will have performers, okay, musicians that perform the material at that high level, which Mangini can be considered one of those. And then there are architects of a band. And the architects build the entire framework of the piece of work or the art that is being made. Whether it's an album, whether it's a song, whether it's constructing a concept, right? And creating a string of continuity through all the different ideas that are occurring. An architect sets the tone and the mood of the music and keeps it consistent throughout. And that's something obviously Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, whatever you want to think about him, has done over the years. As Mike Portnoy has helped with Dream Theater. He is an architect. Much like Danny Carey of Tool, you know, a lot of those drum parts are a staple within the song, right? The drums are just as important as the lyrics are. So I think that's huge. And Neil Peart from Rush, another great example. You know, these drum parts that are composed at such a high level and really understanding the artistry behind it. That's sort of the common thread between these guys. Which brings me to my next point, which is not a very serious tone here, but fun. His drum parts are fucking fun. And that is the whole long and short of it. He makes it fun to listen to Dream Theater. His parts put a smile on your face. They put a smile on his face, on everybody else in the band's faces, right? That's one of the most crucial elements to this and cannot be understated. Just like being an architect, composer, and a songwriter, the fun factor is what ties them all together and makes it worth listening to at the end of the day. Now, hey, don't get me wrong. I love me some, brutally serious compositions, listening to Beethoven's symphonies, listening to Philip Glass's work on his many movie soundtracks that he's worked on. But even in a way, those are fun to listen to. There's a playfulness, to the heavy, right? There's a playfulness to the heaviness, to the darkness that has been conveyed. A lot of Dream Theater's music, especially on like Awake, very, very, very dark. Yet, they still make it fun and engaging to listen to, right? And it's all these points that just keep coming full circle, right? Which brings me to my next thing that cannot be understated. He is unmistakable as a character, right? As a character within the band, you know his face, you know his voice, you know what he brings to the table because he's Mike Portnoy. Duh. I can't say the same for Mike Mangini, okay? I just can't. Mike Portnoy has this persona about him, the way that he carries himself, the attitude that he brings to the songs. Okay? He brings a very specific energy that you don't get with the later albums. Okay? And I'm not sure famously, but there was a comparison that I saw between Mike Portnoy playing 6 o'clock, boom, doom, da, boom, da, da, boom, boom, da, right? I did an entire video on that explaining why that song is awesome. He plays it with such vigor and gusto that there's no mistaking that it's him playing it. On the other side, you have Mangini that kind of half-heartedly just gets through the notes, has the metronome playing in the background in his ear, and that is also a massive drawback to the newer stuff. They started playing to these metronome tracks and having all these backing tracks behind them. I don't have a huge problem with backing tracks, but the metronome really does suck the life out of the song in a live environment. And I think it's pretty apparent that Portnoy was not playing to a metronome on a lot of these performances, especially on 6 o'clock, because he is just blasting through that part. And he's hitting those drums with meaning, with passion, with vigor. Do you understand what I'm trying to put across here? I'm conveying something very important. Now, that brings me to the next thing, energy and power, which I basically just explained, so I'm not really going to go too far into that. But all of these aspects put together, okay, lead to the single most important thing that you can imagine in music, and that is creating not just good moments that I highlighted from the other side of the Venn diagram, which we will not speak of, but to create magical moments, to literally have magic in your playing, which is something that I could sit here trying to explain for days, and it still might not get through to most of you, if any of you, because it is such an intangible thing, such an esoteric concept, to try to explain how or why somebody is able to create such magical drum parts. And this goes all the way back to the fun factor, right? Fun is magic. Magic is fun. It's almost always like that. And some drummers that I can think of that have these magical properties to them, John Bonham of Led Zeppelin, okay? He can play a 4-to-the-floor groove, or something like When the Levee Breaks, boom, boom, ka, boom, boom, ka, in a hallway. And he can make that simple bass and snare groove sound like the biggest, baddest, best thing you've ever heard in your entire life. And there's a lot to be said about that. I think Portnoy does the same thing with a lot of his more simplistic grooves. I mean, I've heard him talk in many interviews about, Ringo Starr being one of his favorite drummers and most respected drummers of all time. And I agree with him. Ringo Starr had a simplicity to him, but he was also able to make some pretty complex and intricate things accessible to everybody. Okay? And that's what I feel like is the magic behind the madness, right? These magical moments. People try to explain, why does early Dream Theater, or even through the 2000s Dream Theater, do something that doesn't happen anymore, right? And I know there's a lot of people that really love the new stuff and think it's great, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, but I'm also entitled to mine. So it makes me very happy to see that this is occurring. Okay, Mike Portnoy is a monolithic force in the world of drumming and in the world of Dream Theater. And I honestly think all the things that I've outlined in these Venn diagrams here, or this one Venn diagram, cannot be understated. All those things in Portnoy's column that he just got down are more important than anything that you could technically play. And with all of that, he has the technical chops that most people, like I said, 99.99% of drummers do not have and will never have. Okay, so, if you're just going to be catering to the elite, then you're kind of leaving out this whole world that exists beyond that. And, I'm not saying that the elite drumming class shouldn't be revered. They absolutely should. But there's something that takes a drummer from being just elite, sort of like Berkeley faculty and within academia and very technically stunning, to a supernatural level, which is where I believe Mike Portnoy has landed himself over the years with a lot of this Dream Theater material. So, with that said, it's beautiful to see that the compositional heartbeat of the band has finally returned to its rightful place. So, welcome back Kevin Moore to the band. Sorry. Welcome back Mike Portnoy to the band. Jeez, I slipped up pretty bad there. I'm actually awaiting the return of Kevin Moore. And also, maybe even Charlie Dominici, man. That would be one of the funniest things I think I could ever think of. To think of those two back in the band and getting into a fight. Imagine Kevin Moore and Charlie Dominici fighting about a song. That would just be so funny, man. I would love to see all that petty energy, the petty lightning bolts being hurled at each other. But I think Kevin Moore's a doctor now, so he has more important, more pressing affairs to attend to. Well, everybody, thanks for having the patience to stick along with this. Yeah, I'll see you on the other side. Goodbye.